Under the pale light of the orbital station Hellier Prime, Elias Ward stood very still and reminded himself not to breathe too loudly. The air here was thinner than Earth's, carefully balanced for the dozens of species attending the Imperial convergence. It smelled faintly metallic, mixed with something floral that came from the living walls lining the vast hall. Elias had trained for alien environments before, but nothing in his years as a human diplomatic aide had prepared him for this moment. He was about to pretend to be someone's husband, not just anyone's husband, the husband of Princess Seralith of the Aurelian Empire, an empire that had ruled a third of known space for over 10,000 years, an empire that did not take kindly to mistakes. Elias adjusted the unfamiliar fabric at his shoulders. The ceremonial garment shimmered softly, responding to his body heat. It was beautiful and uncomfortable at the same time, like everything else about today. Around him, towering figures moved with slow confidence, scaled diplomats, crystalline beings floating on gravitic fields, insectoid envoys clicking softly as they communicated. Elias felt very human among them, too human. "You understand your role?" the quiet voice in his ear asked. "Yes," Elias replied softly, barely moving his lips. "I stand, I remain silent unless spoken to, I confirm the bond, then I leave." "That's correct," said Director Han from Earth's diplomatic corps. "This is only ceremonial. The princess's consort died 3 cycles ago. Without a recognized spouse, certain factions could challenge her claim. You are a temporary solution, temporary, disposable." Elias had understood that part very clearly. He had been chosen because he was unimportant, a background aide, no family of note, no political weight. If something went wrong, the consequences would not spread far. Humans were good at filling gaps like that. A deep harmonic tone echoed through the hall, conversations faded. The convergence was beginning. Elias lifted his eyes. At the far end of the hall, massive doors unfolded like petals, revealing Princess Seralith. She moved with a calm that silenced the room. Tall and willowy, her form was humanoid but unmistakably alien, skin like polished pearl, faintly luminous, eyes dark and deep like starlit water. Intricate markings traced her temples, glowing softly with her pulse. Her presence was not loud or aggressive, but it carried weight like gravity. Elias had seen images of her before. None of them had done her justice. She walked alone. That was the problem. The Aurelian Empire valued continuity above all else. A ruling princess without a bonded consort was seen as unstable, incomplete, dangerous. The death of her husband had created a crack, and cracks invited knives. So Earth had been asked, quietly, carefully, to provide a stand-in, a legal fiction. A human spouse recognized only for the duration of the convergence, long enough to secure Seralith's position. No one expected the princess to care who it was. No one expected Elias to matter. As Seralith reached the center of the hall, she stopped. The ancient AI that governed the convergence began to speak, its voice resonating through every species' perception. "By law of union and recognition, the bonded partner of Princess Seralith of Aurelia shall now present themselves." Every eye turned. Elias felt the weight of 1,000 gazes lock onto him. Some were curious, many were cold. A few were openly hostile. He stepped forward. Each footstep echoed far too loudly in his ears. He kept his posture straight, his expression neutral, just as he had practiced. He was not here as Elias Ward. He was a symbol, a placeholder. He stopped beside Seralith, 1 pace behind her, exactly as protocol dictated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Seralith turned her head. Her eyes met his. Up close, Elias realized something was wrong. Her expression was not distant or indifferent, as he had expected. There was no boredom, no mild contempt for a lesser species forced into her orbit. She was watching him, closely. As if measuring something, the AI continued, "State your identity for the record." Elias opened his mouth. "Elias Ward, human, acting consort under provisional." Before he could finish, Seralith moved. She turned fully toward him and reached out, her hand closed around his. The contact sent a jolt through Elias' entire body. Her skin was warm, steady. Very real, a sharp intake of breath rippled through the hall. Elias froze. This was not part of the plan. His training screamed at him to pull away to correct the mistake. Seralith did not let go. She raised their joined hands so all could see and spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried without amplification. "He is not acting." The hall erupted in stunned murmurs. Elias' mind went blank. "I choose him," Seralith continued. Before this convergence, before these witnesses, I claim Elia's ward as my true consort. Director Hand's voice exploded in Elias' ear, barely contained panic bleeding through. What is happening? Ward, step back. This was not authorized. Elias couldn't move. Saralith squeezed his hand just slightly, not a command, a reassurance. The ancient AI paused, processing. Clarification required. Princess Saralith, do you invoke sovereign choice? Yes, she said without hesitation. Another wave of sound rolled through the chamber. Sovereign choice was old law, dangerous law. It allowed a ruling noble to override tradition, but it carried consequences, severe ones. Elias finally found his voice. Your Highness, he said quietly, leaning just enough to be heard by her alone, this wasn't part of the agreement. I know, Saralith replied just as quietly. That is why it matters. The AI spoke again. Human Elias Ward, do you contest this declaration? Every instinct told Elias to deny it, to save himself, to save Earth from whatever storm this would cause. But when he looked at Saralith, he saw no desperation, no fear, only resolve. He thought of humanity's place in the galaxy, always adapting, always stepping into roles others refused, surviving not through strength but through choice. He swallowed. I do not contest it, Elias said. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Declaration accepted, the AI intoned. Bond pending formalization, proceed. The convergence continued, but nothing felt the same. Elias stood beside the princess, her hand still in his, acutely aware that his life had just shifted onto a path he did not understand and could no longer escape. As delegates spoke and ancient politics unfolded, whispers spread. Some stared at Elias with new interest, others with clear hostility, a human, a real consort, unthinkable. When the session finally ended, Saralith guided him away through a private corridor before anyone could intercept them. Guards sealed the passage behind them, leaving only silence and the soft hum of the station. Only then did she release his hand. Elias let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for hours. With respect, he said, choosing his words carefully, you just turned a small lie into a very large problem. Saralith studied him for a long moment. Yes, she said, I did. Why? Elias asked. You don't know me? No, she agreed, but I know what you are not. She turned away, gazing through a transparent panel at the stars beyond. The others who sought this position wanted power, control, safety behind tradition. You stood there believing you were nothing more than a tool, and yet you did not resent it. You accepted it. Elias frowned. That doesn't make me special. It makes you dangerous, she said softly, to those who rely on fear. He considered that. Humans had been underestimated their entire history. Maybe the galaxy was making the same mistake. You realize they will test this, Elias said. They'll test me. They'll try to break whatever this is. Saralith turned back to him. For the first time, something like a small smile touched her lips. I know, she said. That is why I chose a human. Elias felt a strange mix of fear and pride settle in his chest. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Empire was already shifting, alliances recalculating, old powers bristling, and at the center of it all stood a man who had only meant to pretend. The private residence assigned to Princess Saralith was quiet in a way Elias had never experienced before. It was not the silence of emptiness, but of control. Every sound was dampened, every surface curved and alive with faint light. The walls shifted color slowly, responding to movement and emotion, though Elias did not know that yet. He stood near the entrance, hands clasped behind his back, unsure what he was allowed to touch, where he was allowed to stand, or even who he was supposed to be now. Across the room, Saralith stood near a wide window that looked out into space. Stars drifted past like slow thoughts. She seemed calm, almost peaceful, as if the chaos she had unleashed did not exist. Elias finally broke the silence. You should know, he said carefully. Earth did not agree to this. They will panic when they realize this wasn't temporary. They already are, Saralith replied without turning. Your director attempted to contact my council before we even left the hall. That's comforting, Elias said dryly. She turned then, studying him again with that same focused attention. You are afraid, she said. Yes, Elias answered honestly. I think that would be normal. Saralith inclined her head slightly. It is. Fear means you understand consequences. She gestured toward a seating structure that rose smoothly from the floor. Elias hesitated, then sat when she did. The structure adjusted itself to his human frame without comment, which made him uneasy in a different way. You may leave, Sarilith said to the guards at the entrance. There was a brief pause, then the guards bowed and exited, sealing the chamber. Elias' heart rate increased. Alone was not a word he was ready for. "You're safe here," Sarilith said, sensing his tension. "For now." "For now," Elias repeated. "That seems to be a theme." She folded her hands in her lap. "You were not supposed to accept," she said. "Most would have refused, especially knowing what it might cost." "I didn't fully understand what it would cost," Elias replied. "I still don't." "That is also why I chose you," she said calmly. Elias leaned back slightly. "You keep saying that. I'm starting to feel like there's a list I wasn't given." Sarilith's eyes softened just a fraction. "In my empire, marriages among rulers are contracts, weapons. Every candidate presented to me carried alliances and expectations. You carried none." "That doesn't sound like a compliment," Elias said. "It is the highest one I can give," she replied. "You arrived with no hidden demands, no hunger for position. You believed yourself replaceable." Elias looked down at his hands. "Most humans are taught that early." Sarilith considered that. "Then your people are more dangerous than my advisors believe." Before Elias could respond, a subtle vibration moved through the floor. A presence entered the room without a sound, resolving into a tall, angular figure with metallic skin and glowing eyes. "This is High Arbiter Kale," Sarilith said. "He represents the Imperial Council." Kale's gaze fixed on Elias, unblinking. "Human," he said, "you have caused significant disruption." "I'm told I have that effect," Elias replied. Sarilith glanced at him sharply, then back to Kale. "State the Council's position." "The Council questions the validity of your choice," Kale said. "Sovereign choice is law, but rarely invoked without cause. Many believe this is manipulation." "It is," Sarilith said, "just not by him." Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then by whom?" "By tradition," she answered. "By fear of change." Kale turned back to Elias. "You are aware that trials may be invoked to test your worthiness." "Yes," Elias said. "I was briefed on that possibility after the fact." "You may die," Kale said flatly. Elias shrugged. "I've had worse performance reviews." There was a pause. Then unexpectedly, Kale gave a short, sharp laugh. "Interesting," the Arbiter said. "Very well, the Council will convene within one cycle. Until then, the bond remains provisional." He looked at Sarilith. "Be certain, Princess, the Empire will not forgive weakness." Sarilith met his gaze without flinching. "Nor will it survive stagnation." Kale inclined his head and vanished as silently as he had arrived. The room felt warmer after he left. Elias exhaled slowly. "I assume that went poorly." "That went exactly as expected," Sarilith said. She rose and walked toward a secondary chamber. "Come, there is much you must learn and little time." The days that followed blurred together. Elias was introduced to customs that contradicted each other, laws older than human civilization, and political structures built on balance rather than force. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he chose his words carefully. The court watched him. Some nobles dismissed him openly. Others observed in silence. A few tested him with subtle insults or complex questions meant to expose ignorance. Elias answered honestly when he didn't know something. When he did know, he explained simply without trying to impress. That more than anything unsettled them. One evening during a formal gathering, a towering delegate from the Keth Dominion approached him. Its voice vibrated through the floor. "Human," it said, "do you believe yourself worthy of standing beside Orelia's ruler?" Elias considered the question. "Worthy," he said. "No, useful, maybe." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. The Keth leaned closer. "Explain." "I'm not here because I'm the best," Elias said calmly. "I'm here because I adapt. If this empire needs strength, I'll support it. If it needs restraint, I'll offer that too." The Keth studied him, then stepped back. "Unacceptable answer," it said, "and yet compelling." Sarilith watched from across the room, her expression unreadable. Later that night, she joined Elias on a quiet balcony. "You are making enemies," she said. "I was told that was inevitable," Elias replied. "Yes," she said, "but you are also making something else." "Allies," he guessed. She shook her head. "Questions." That was worse and better all at once. The first attack came without warning. Elias was walking a corridor alone when the lights dimmed suddenly. The air shifted. A pressure wave slammed him into the wall. Before he could recover, a blade of compressed energy formed inches from his throat. He did not scream. He did not beg. He raised his hands slowly. "If this is about seating arrangements, I apologize." A cloaked figure stepped into view. "You should never have accepted." it hissed. Elias swallowed. I didn't plan to. The figure hesitated. That hesitation saved his life. Security fields snapped into place, locking the attacker in a frozen shimmer. Guards arrived seconds later. When Sarilith reached him, Elias was still standing, though his knees were weak. Are you injured? She asked, her voice tight. No, he said, just reassessing my career path. She placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. This will escalate, she said. They will try again. I know, Elias replied, so we should change the pattern. Sarilith looked at him sharply. Explain. They expect me to hide behind guards, he said. To rely on your authority, humans don't survive that way. What way do they survive? She asked. By being visible, Elias said, by forcing threats into the open. Sarilith studied him for a long moment, then slowly she smiled. The council will hate this, she said. That's how we'll know it's working, Elias replied. The next day, Elias requested to speak before the council. The chamber was vast and cold, its ceiling lost in shadow. Ancient figures watched from elevated platforms, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disdain. Elias stood alone in the center. I am not here to claim superiority, he said. I know what I am human. That means I learn fast, fail often, and adjust. Some scoffed. I will not ask you to trust me, Elias continued. I will ask you to test me openly, not in shadows, not through knives in corridors. A murmur spread. Sarilith watched from her throne, her posture proud. If I fall, Elias said, you lose nothing you value. If I stand, you gain something unexpected. Silence followed. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. Very well, human, the trials will begin. Elias bowed his head slightly. As he rose, he met Sarilith's gaze. For the first time, he realized something important. He was no longer pretending. And the galaxy was about to find out what that meant. Elias was escorted from the residence at Dawn Cycle, though dawn here was only a programmed shift in the station's light. The corridor stretched wide and empty, its floor glowing faintly beneath his steps. Guards walked several paces behind him, not close enough to help, not far enough to ignore him. That distance felt intentional. Ahead, massive doors opened into an arena unlike anything Elias had imagined. It was not a place of weapons or crowds. Instead, it looked like a landscape folded into a dome, rolling ground, fractured stone platforms, flowing light that mimicked water, and above it all, a sky that shifted colors slowly. The air carried a low hum, as if the space itself was alive. This is a cognitive trial, announced a neutral voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. Strength is irrelevant, violence is forbidden, survival depends on judgment. Elias took a slow breath that at least sounded familiar. The guards stepped back, the doors sealed. He was alone. Almost immediately, the ground ahead changed. Stone rose and fell, reshaping itself into pathways that led in different directions. Symbols appeared in the air, written in languages Elias recognized only partially. He moved forward carefully, resisting the urge to rush. Humans had survived worse than strange rooms. They survived by thinking. The first platform ended abruptly, dropping into a glowing mist below. 3 paths branched out, each marked by a symbol. Elias studied them. One symbol matched an Aurelian concept he had learned recently, continuity. Another meant authority. The third was unfamiliar, but its structure suggested adaptation. Most rulers would choose authority. Tradition would push toward continuity. Elias stepped toward adaptation. The platform shifted, forming a bridge under his feet. Behind him, the other 2 paths collapsed into mist. Somewhere, unseen observers took note. As Elias moved deeper into the arena, the environment responded to his choices. When he rushed, the ground destabilized. When he paused and observed, the path steadied. Problems presented themselves not as enemies, but as situations, failing structures, conflicting signals, limited resources. At one point, he encountered a projection of another being trapped beneath fallen debris. The figure pleaded for help in a distorted voice. Elias tested the projection first. He threw a small stone through it. The image flickered, a trap then, designed to exploit empathy. Instead of walking away, Elias altered the terrain around it, stabilizing the area without approaching directly. The projection vanished, replaced by a clear path forward. He frowned. That wasn't very fair, he muttered. The voice responded. Fairness is irrelevant. Yeah, Elias said. That's what usually gets people killed. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Elias lost track of time. Hunger came, then faded. Fatigue pressed in, but he kept moving, step by careful step. By the time the arena dissolved and the doors reopened, Elias was exhausted, dusty, and very much alive. The murmurs began immediately. He chose unpredictability. He did not dominate the trial, he cooperated with it. He should not have survived. Sarilith waited beyond the doors. When she saw him, her shoulders eased just slightly. "You passed," she said. "I figured," Elias replied. "I'm still here." "That was only the first," she reminded him. "I know," he said. "Humans rarely get only one test." The second trial was public, a vast hall filled with observers from dozens of species. Platforms rose in concentric circles, and at the center stood Elias alone again. This time the challenge was not hidden. "This trial measures balance," the arbiter announced. "You will be given control of a simulated system. Resources are limited. Demands will increase." Before Elias could ask questions, the space around him transformed. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing populations, energy flows, environmental stability. A small artificial world, fragile and complex. Almost immediately, alerts flared: energy shortages, social unrest, environmental collapse pending. Elias felt a familiar pressure. This was crisis management. He had trained for this, though never at this scale. He resisted the instinct to optimize for one solution. Instead, he made small adjustments, redirected energy slowly, reduced production to stabilize the environment, allowed short-term dissatisfaction to prevent long-term collapse. Observers scoffed. He allows inefficiency. He accepts loss. Then a new alert appeared. A simulated disaster, massive, immediate. The system demanded a sacrifice. One region could be saved by condemning another. Elias stared at the projections. He remembered Earth, history lessons full of choices like this. Always someone paying the cost. He made a different decision. He shut down the simulation's highest demand sector entirely, forcing the system into emergency conservation mode. Every region suffered, but none collapsed. The hall went silent. The arbiter's voice returned, slower now. "You chose shared burden?" "Yes," Elias said. "It's the only kind people accept long-term." The simulation stabilized. The second trial ended. The whispers this time were different. Dangerous. Effective. Human. The third trial came at night cycle and was not announced. Elias woke to darkness and pressure. The room around him shifted, walls closing in. Alarms blared, not in sound but in sensation. His body reacted before his mind did, heart racing, breath shallow. This was not a puzzle. This was fear. The environment attacked his senses, replaying failures, imagined futures, voices layered over each other. Accusations, doubts, images of Sarilith standing alone, of Earth turning away, of himself failing and being forgotten. He clenched his fists. "This isn't real," he said aloud. The pressure increased. "Maybe not," he whispered, "but it feels real, and that's the point." He focused on his breathing, slowed it, grounded himself in what he could control. Humans had learned this the hard way, through centuries of surviving their own minds. The illusions weakened. When the chamber finally released him, Elias collapsed to his knees, shaking but conscious. Sarilith was there almost instantly, kneeling beside him. "You were not warned," she said, anger tight in her voice. "They never warn you about the hardest parts," Elias replied weakly. She helped him up, her grip firm. "Many fail that trial," she said. "Most do not recover." "I didn't win," he said. "I just stayed." She met his eyes. "That is winning." News of his progress spread fast. Some factions grew louder in their opposition. Others grew cautious. A few, quietly, began to support him. Assassination attempts stopped. That worried Elias more than if they had continued. On the eve of the final trial, Sarilith joined him in the residence again. The stars outside seemed closer tonight. "If you fail tomorrow," she said, "the council may dissolve the bond. You will be sent away." "And if I succeed?" Elias asked. She hesitated. "Then the empire changes." Elias nodded slowly. "No pressure." She allowed herself a small smile. The final trial took place at the heart of the station. There was no arena, no simulation, just a council chamber and a single question. "You may speak," the arbiter said. Elias stepped forward. "I know you fear what I represent," he said. "Not because I am strong, but because I am different." Some shifted uncomfortably. "I am not here to replace your traditions," Elias continued. "I am here to show you that survival does not require sameness." He looked around the chamber. "Humans are weak alone. That is why we learn to work together, across differences, across failure." Silence held. "I will not rule you," Elias said. I will stand with her, and if that frightens you, good. Fear means growth is possible. The arbiter studied him for a long time. Finally, he spoke. The trials are complete. The chamber held its breath. The human stands. A sound rose, not applause, but something deeper, recognition. Elias closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Sarilith was watching him, pride clear and unhidden. He had not conquered. He had endured, and in doing so, he had changed everything. The chamber did not empty after the arbiter's declaration. If anything, the air grew heavier. Elias stood where he was, feeling the weight of countless thoughts pressing in on him. He had passed the trials, but passing did not mean peace. It meant consequences. He understood that now. Across the chamber, Sarilith rose from her seat. She did not look at the council. She looked only at him. Come, she said. That single word carried authority older than the station itself. Elias walked to her side. As he did, the floor lights adjusted, drawing attention to them together. Not princess and human, not ruler and subject, something else, a pair. The trials tested the human, Sarilith said, her voice calm but clear. Now the empire must face its own. A low murmur spread. Several council members shifted, clearly uncomfortable. The law is satisfied, one elder said. The bond may proceed, but nothing, Sarilith interrupted. You invoke the trials to preserve tradition. The trials were completed. Tradition has spoken. The High Arbiter watched closely. You are asking the council to accept change. I am asking the council to accept reality, Sarilith replied. The galaxy is already changing. The question is whether Aurelia leads it or fears it. Silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, council members began to stand. Not all of them, but enough. We have observed the human, said a tall, avian delegate. He does not dominate, he stabilizes. He absorbs pressure instead of redirecting it, said another. That is valuable. Opposition remained, but it was no longer absolute. The arbiter raised his staff. The council will not block the bond. A breath Elias did not realize he was holding finally escaped him, but the arbiter was not finished. However, he continued, acceptance comes with responsibility. Elias Ward, human of Earth, do you accept the role of consort in full awareness of its cost? Elias stepped forward before Sarilith could speak. I do, he said. Do you understand that you will never again be only human? The arbiter asked. Elias thought of Earth, of quiet nights and small choices, of a life that had already slipped out of reach. Yes, he said. Do you accept that your presence will alter power, invite conflict, and demand sacrifice? Elias looked at Sarilith. She met his gaze, steady and honest. Yes, he said again. That's what humans do when something matters. The arbiter lowered his staff. Then the bond is recognized. The chamber's lights shifted, forming ancient symbols that wrapped briefly around Elias and Sarilith before fading. It was done, not with celebration, with acknowledgement. Later, when the council finally dispersed, the station felt different. Not quieter, more aware. Elias stood on a balcony overlooking the docking rings, watching ships from dozens of worlds drift in slow patterns. News was already spreading, messages flooding in, some supportive, many uncertain. Sarilith joined him, standing close but not touching. You could still leave, she said softly. It would be understandable. Elias smiled faintly. You're offering me an exit after all that? Yes, she said, because choice matters. He considered it, truly considered it, then he shook his head. If I leave now, everything I did becomes a story about fear. I'd rather it be a story about staying. Sarilith's expression softened. Then stay, she said, not as a symbol, as yourself. The formal bond ceremony took place one cycle later. It was not grand by imperial standards. No massive crowds, no forced celebration, just witnesses, law, and intent. Elias wore simple attire, adapted from Aurelian design but clearly human. Sarilith wore something older, something reserved for moments that defined history rather than decorated it. When the moment came, she took his hand again. This time, Elias did not freeze. I began this path with a lie, Elias said, his voice steady. I do not wish to continue it that way. Sarilith inclined her head. Nor do I, then let this be true, Elias said, not because it benefits empires, but because we choose it. I choose it, Sarilith replied, the bond finalized, no thunder, no spectacle, just certainty. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy reacted. Some powers tested the new balance, probing borders and alliances. They found no sudden aggression, no reckless expansion. Instead, they found dialogue, shared oversight. human diplomats working alongside Aurelian strategists, asking questions no one else had thought to ask. Elias did not command fleets. He attended meetings. He listened. He reframed arguments. When tensions rose, he slowed them. When fear took hold, he named it. That unnerved many. How does a species survive without dominance? One envoy demanded during a closed session. Elias answered calmly, by making dominance unnecessary. Earth's position changed as well. Humans were no longer fringe participants. They were consulted. Not because they were powerful, but because they were adaptable. A human engineer helped stabilize an Aurelian energy grid. A human mediator prevented a border dispute from turning violent. Small actions, large effects. One evening, months later, Elias stood again in the residence watching the stars. Seralith joined him, her presence familiar now. "You have altered the Empire," she said. "We did," Elias corrected gently. She nodded. "Yes, we did." There was still resistance. There always would be. Change never settled cleanly. But the knives in corridors never returned. Instead, questions did. And questions, Elias had learned, were the beginning of better futures. Far beyond the station, histories were being rewritten, not with conquest, but with a human who had only meant to pretend, and a princess who refused to accept what was expected of her. Together, they had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. That strength did not always come from taking power. Sometimes it came from standing still, holding a hand and choosing to stay. The end.